this is why Russia has been a paper tiger, to use the term that we identified in 2023, a paper tiger for so long. Because they've known this for a long, they are experts at covert influence. And that's what we're talking about. What your friend ran was a covert influence campaign, right? It involved all the elements of targeting, messaging, persuasion, narrative, and all that was lacking was action, right? So he created an entire covert influence campaign on his own as an experiment, which goes to show how easy it really is, how inexpensive and easy it really is. Nowadays, we do that using Telegram, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. 50 years ago, it was the same thing. We would use newspapers, classified ads, pamphlets, leaflets, and junk mail. Like that's where when I was a kid, I'm 44 years old now. When I was 10 years old, there was no internet, there was no AOL disc that came in the mail yet. Like there was nothing. But that doesn't mean there was no covert influence. It means that covert influence was seeded with local newspaper articles. I mean, if you can think about it, think about how difficult it must have been for a local community or municipal or district journalist to come up with a story every week for the local rag that went out to 1,000 households every week. Multiply that across the entire United States, and now you can understand, like, all that Russia had to do back then was put an article on the International News Wire, which is just a one-way feed where all stories go from all journalists in the world. And some journalist in Ohio is going to pick it up and reprint it or republish it or repurpose it, reformat it, claim it as their own, or do research that pulls from that news wire to create a story that goes to 1,000 American households in Oklahoma. So that's the way it's always worked. It's always worked. It's always worked most effectively when you find a very cheap way of spreading what's called dis or misinformation. Dis meaning lies, disinformation is straight up lies. Misinformation is factual information that's interpreted with falsehood. So that like your name really is Mark Gagnon, but if I say, oh, your name is Mark Gagnon, it's based off of the Belgian Gagnon, that's misinformation. Right? I don't actually know what it is. It's probably not Belgian though.
Right. French-Canadian.
Close.
Close enough.
So you're exactly right where it's always, it's easy. It really is that easy. It really is something that could happen. And it is something that people need to be aware of.
So now, how does the CIA deal with this? Because according to the CIA charter, you can't be doing covert ops on the American public.
Right.
That's
so
like a part of it.
So CIA doesn't do it to the American people.
But can they investigate things like this?
CIA cannot. That investigative branch actually falls to Homeland Security and FBI. So this is part of the fracturing of government. CIA's job is to collect secrets from overseas. FBI's job is to protect American interests here at home. So you can't really have FBI collecting secrets overseas. You can't really have CIA protecting American interests here at home. When there's crossover like that, they have to work together. But to your point, it's very, very difficult for the federal government to protect information in the United States because we are a freedom country. We have a freedom of information. So the way that they try to prevent it is essentially by putting legislation and political pressure on organizations, on companies like Facebook and Instagram, or they're all Meta, right? X, Google, Yahoo. They put the onus on them. And that's why you then start to see YouTube. That's why you then start to see those companies control the content that's published on their platforms. So I spend a lot of time talking to YouTube creators like you, and I know that you spend a lot of time making sure that your content does not violate YouTube's guidelines. Well, where do you think YouTube's guidelines come from? You think they're created by YouTube? No. YouTube has created their guidelines to make sure that no creator on their platform violates the government policy that controls YouTube. It's not that CIA is trying to control YouTube. It's that YouTube is that YouTube, which is owned by Google, is trying not to fall victim to a policy of legislation that prevents the kind of content it can publish, because then YouTube can be punished. That's exactly what you saw happen with Facebook. That's exactly what you saw happen with X. That's what you see happening across the board, is this challenge where the company, the for-profit company, Meta, Google, X, is trying not to lose its revenue stream by having its hands slapped by the federal government, because the creators on its user content generated social media platform are creating content that stands in violation of U.S. policy that has been dictated to Yahoo. So as long as we have that kind of government oversight, you're always going to have content creators who are restricted, and they're restricted more than what the government wants to restrict them because the for-profit company has to protect itself. So from the eyes of YouTube, YouTube's like, do I really want to let somebody talk about conspiracies and run the risk of their conspiracy video pissing off the federal government? Or do I just throttle all conspiracy conversations and open the throttle on conversations that have to do with dancing teddy bears?
Interesting.